change, building communities of collaboration and co-inspiration for systemic change. It is a privilege of Universidad Iberoamericana to have such a distinguished and internationally renowned professor and researcher who has been an inspiration to many of us. Both in the pursuit of professional studies as well as in our personal lives, Dr. Peter Senge's work has guided the development of many of Ibero's bachelor's and postgraduate programs. His leadership and systemic vision is shared by our university's vision. It focused on forming leaders who can bring about change, while very especially considering the environment in order to create a better society. This event has been made possible by the joint efforts of the Academy for Systemic Change and La Vaca Independiente. José Luis Cortés, Director of Continuing Education, would also like to welcome you all.
Muy buenas tardes. Yo me voy a permitir hablar en inglés, ya que todo el evento es en inglés. Good afternoon, everybody. For me, it's a great honor to be here this afternoon and on the name of both organizations, La Vaca Independiente, the Independent Company, and la Dirección de Educación Continua, the Continuing Education Program. I want to welcome Peter Senge, and it's really paradigmatic that you are here today, because in Mexico we are living in a very important moment that I believe will transform Mexico. And I think at the Iberoamerican University, most of the students are very encouraged and very conscious of what is going on around Mexico and what is going on around the world. And I think the topic of leadership is really important, because I think there are many leaderships in potential in this university and Mexico in general. So young generations need your support, need your input, and I am totally sure that all what we are going to say this afternoon will encourage everyone. I am very grateful to Claudia Madrazo, and it's really fantastic that she has this initiative to organize all this event together with Mariano Perez, and I am sure that this is just the beginning. We hope that this is just the beginning of a long-venture program between you and the Iberoamerican University. So thank you very much for being here.
And Dr. Peter Senge is head of the Center for Organizational Learning and the aforementioned Academy for Systemic Change. And is also professor of the Dynamic System Groups of MIT Sloan School of Management. His work is mainly focused on promoting the individual capacity to line up personal aspirations with collective results, with generating new thought patterns and mental models, and with helping organizations to transform the economical, educational, environmental, and civilizational crises over time through a systemic leadership approach. He is author of the following books: The Fifth Discipline, the Art and Practice of Organizational Learning, The Lens of Change, Presence, and Exploration of Profound Change in People, Society, and Organization. And more recently, The Necessary Revolution, how individuals and organizations are working together to create a sustainable world. May we begin now?
Thanks. So, welcome everybody. I will use the microphone if I need to. Do I need to? Is it difficult to hear back there? I heard a yes, I heard a no. I think that means it is difficult enough for at least somebody. Okay, so we'll use this to help out. Does that help a little bit? Yeah. Okay. So let me give just a quick overview of our plan for this afternoon, because we want to do something a little bit unusual. And the reason is that the subject matter is unusual. Obviously not leadership. Leadership is something that people talk about all the time. But I have to say, the more I hear, the less interested I get. So we want to approach this subject in a little bit of a different way, more in line with the way we actually do the work. Years ago, I was in a conversation with a remarkable group of leaders. I consider them great leaders. They were ages between about 16 and 25. They were all former gang members in a part of Boston that's very difficult. A lot of violence. And this organization, which is comprised of almost all former gang members, has been operating now for 25 years and has had an extraordinary impact on the way that community functions, the way the police operate, the way the courts operate, the way all the social services operate, and ultimately the way the schools operate. Because they meet the young people on the streets, and they work with them on the streets. In any event, we were having a conversation for a day, and we were sitting in a circle, and at the very end, I came up with this great idea. It probably wasn't such a great idea. I don't know what led me to do. I said, why don't we do a checkout, go around the circle, and then each person say a few words about what does leadership mean to you? Now I have to say, and I'll explain more of this in a minute, I actually don't use the word a lot in talks or gatherings like this. And the reason is very simple. In most places in the world, and I'm sure Mexico isn't really much different, in most places in the world, people hear the word leadership and they think boss. Right? The leaders are the bosses. If we have problems in our organization, we say, well, we don't have good leaders. And by that, of course, we mean the people in the top positions aren't very good. If our country's in problem, we have to get better leaders, which means we've got to get better people in elected offices. I think that's a big problem. Two reasons. This is the reason I use the word very cautiously. One is, it's a bad definition. It's a common definition. Don't get me wrong. But it's not a very useful definition. If you really believe the leaders are those people, what does it say about me? What does it say about all the rest of us who aren't in those positions? We're obviously not leaders, as they are. So that's only a problem if you believe, as I do, that lots and lots of people actually need to contribute as leaders to deal with the really difficult problems we face in our societies today. In fact, for me, one of the best definitions of the core problems that we face, whether you look at them from a social perspective, an economic, or a biological or ecological perspective, is we face a host of problems in the world for which the leadership of hierarchical authority is inadequate. Period. That doesn't mean it's unimportant. It's just not sufficient. I mean, look, the countries around the world have tried and tried and tried to get some sort of agreement about climate destabilization or climate change. And look at how much progress we've made. And you can cite, for that one example, hundreds of examples. So it's a very simple way to define the times we live in today. We live in an era where we face deep, fundamental problems for which traditional hierarchical leadership is not adequate. So it's not a very useful definition to go around saying, well, the leaders are them. It's also actually not accurate. Very few people who use the word leadership actually know what the word means, where it comes from, what the history of it is. I know the history of the English, which is not too different than the history we use in Spanish. The verb to lead in English comes from a very old root, Indo-European root, thousands of years old. And it's typically written life, L-E-I-T-H. And it's written in English. And what it means is to step across a threshold. To step across the threshold. That simple movement, which I really like because it's physical, it's kinesthetic. That simple movement of stepping ahead is actually the essence of all leading, right? Courage, one of the words most often associated with real leadership. The courage it takes to step ahead. You may look foolish. You almost certainly will not succeed completely, because if you step into something really new, about the only thing you can say for sure is that you don't know everything you need to know. Inspiration is another word that's long been associated with leadership. And I'm sure many of you know. The Latin root, to breathe life into. So in this stepping ahead, something happens. Some energy is generated. Some life force starts to operate in an idea or an undertaking. These are actually not new ideas. These are very old ideas. And I say that to recognize that there's something in us, deep within us as human beings, that understands these matters very deeply. So in that circle, with those young people, many of whom I knew pretty well, they were a pretty amazing group. It was about 2/3 young men, 1/3 young women, and all of whom had come from the streets. They'd come from very, very difficult circumstances, and all of whom worked now on the streets with other young people in similar circumstances today, who they try to recruit into their organization to help other young people. So we went around the circle, and I'll never forget that. About halfway into that, I thought to myself, oh, I wish I had a recorder. Just to record the clarity and simplicity of the comments of that extraordinary group of young former gang members. One person said, well, when I think of leadership, I think of my mother. He didn't think of a boss. He thought of his mother. And then he told a story about his mother. And another person said, I don't ever think of myself as a leader. It's a strange thing for me to think of myself as a leader. Which as soon as he said it, I recognized immediately. Those people who are doing it are much too busy doing it to think about themselves as the leaders. It's actually not a critical part of their identity. What is the what, the why. What are we trying to accomplish? Why does this matter? Who needs to be involved? Those are, of course, the questions that matter. Not, am I a good leader? But the last person to go around the circle, I always remember what he said. I think he was probably about 17 or 18 years old, a young Cambodian man. Because people who live in this community are about 50% Latinos from all over, mostly Central American immigrants, and then a lot of Southeast Asians and a lot of Central Africans. So very, very mixed. And this person said, oh, leadership, I don't have any interest. He said, it has no meaning to me. He said, all I try to do is what will serve the whole. Two words he used. All I ever try to do is understand what will serve the whole. Suggesting that this is actually a very mysterious domain. It's a very generative, creative domain. If you look at like getting together and talking about the arts, we can talk about music, we can talk about dance, we can talk about visual arts, but the talk would not be it, right? We know that. So this is a somewhat similar subject. So our plan for this afternoon is really simple. I'm going to say just a few more simple words to kind of get us started. Hopefully, you have a little sense of the direction. And then I'm going to invite you to reflect a bit on what this means to you. Because the truth of the matter is, what I say, what Claudia says, what Mariana says is really not very important this afternoon. It's what you say. What do you think? Because we actually have one really simple goal. This is a little bit crazy, probably completely impractical under the circumstances. But anyhow, our simple goal is that by the end of the short time we have together, each person leaves here with a little more sense of who they are as a leader. That's it. Very simple. So we have no lecture planned. The screen has already been put away. My computer's in the car. So you don't have to worry. There'll be no PowerPoints, no slick presentation. Just some questions. Questions that for us have been very generative. Let me say a word or two more about my fellow compatriots in crime here, Claudia and Mariana, both of whom are graduates of Ibero. So we thought it was really nice to have two people here who are graduating from the university, and both of whom are leading in very, very interesting contexts. I've known Claudia the longest. We've worked together now for about 2.5 years. And what she has accomplished in this program, Guillermo mentioned DIA, Developing Intelligence Through Art, is a worldwide phenomenon. There's almost no program quite like it any place in the world. They've already trained over 25,000 teachers, and they've reached millions of students with a very simple idea. What if you could give young children, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, particularly that age, an opportunity to ponder a work of art, and then reflect, what does it mean? What do I see? Why do I see that? What's the story it tells? Why is that the story I hear or imagine? But also to create space for one another. Because you see, there's no right answer to the question, what does the painting mean? Is there? Oh, you can have a lecture that would bore any of us about the history and what it means and what the experts say it means. But what makes art art is you and me. What makes art art is we step into it and we interact. So the idea was to use art in this fashion, particularly as a vehicle for transforming pedagogy. So that teachers would learn how to create space for the children to think for themselves and to express themselves and to learn how to create that space for one another. Quite an amazing program. It's been going now for over 15 years. Mariana, I know for all of about 3 months. Very short time. I know her by Skype for 3 months, and I know her physically, face-to-face, for about 1 month. And she has been doing a lot of really interesting work. It's a context we want to tap into in some of the ecological restoration projects, particularly in the Yucatan. Did her master's thesis at Michigan after she graduated from here on interviewing leaders in fishing communities. So, what we're going to do is, I'm going to just make 1 or 2 more very simple comments. Hopefully ones will be useful for what we're going to do next. Is to give you a chance to reflect a little bit on what you're hearing, what I've been saying that kind of resonates for you. We want to particularly honor the students here. Having the 3 of us planning this, we also took some time to reflect on this period in our lives. For Mariana, it's quite recent. For Claudia, a little less recent. For me, quite a bit less recent. But it was really quite pivotal. The time when I was a student and the time shortly after I finished my undergraduate studies. I look back now and I know it was really, really critical. I was very active. I got engaged in a lot of change activities. And I was in a space, in an environment, in a university. I was a student at Stanford. that really was a great place for me to grow in my capacities, to be a leader. Now having defined what I mean. Not a boss. I think I'd probably be a terrible boss. So we wanted to kind of anchor on that time period a little, because it's such a pivotal one. And probably, if I were completely honest with you, as I recall, we got into thinking about that because, in a sense, we were recognizing the tragedy that happens when young people go through their 15, 18, 20, 22, 25, that time period of life when we really are becoming an adult in every way, and do not recognize that they can make a difference in the world. Because that, to me, is a tragedy.